The plane's engines hummed as Marcus Chen settled into seat 23B, the last available spot on Flight 447 to Chicago. His 6-year-old daughter, Emma, clutched her worn stuffed rabbit against her chest, her eyes still puffy from crying. They'd been traveling for 19 hours, 3 buses, 2 trains, and now this final flight that would take them to Children's Memorial Hospital, where Emma's name had finally, miraculously, appeared on the transplant list. Marcus had sold everything he owned to get them here. His car, his furniture, even his late wife's wedding ring. The guilt of that last sacrifice still burned in his chest. But Sarah would have understood. She would have sold the world itself to save their daughter. As the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, Marcus felt Emma's small hand slip into his. She was trying to be brave, just like always. At 6 years old, she'd already endured more hospital visits than most people experienced in a lifetime. Her congenital heart condition had been a ticking clock since birth. And 3 months ago, that clock had started running out. Sarah's death 2 years earlier had nearly broken them both. But they'd promised each other, father and daughter, that they would keep fighting. Keep hoping, keep moving forward. Marcus didn't notice the commotion in first class. He was too busy whispering a story to Emma, trying to distract her from the anxiety that made her little heart work even harder than it already had to. He didn't see the impeccably dressed man in seat. 2A freeze mid-conversation with his assistant, his phone slipping from his hand. He didn't notice how that man's face had gone completely white, or how his hands had started trembling, but everyone else in first class noticed. "Mr. Whitmore? Sir, are you all right?" His assistant, Jennifer, grabbed his arm, alarmed by the sudden change in her boss's demeanor. James Whitmore, tech billionaire, venture capitalist, the man whose face graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune, couldn't speak. He was staring past the curtain dividing the classes, his eyes locked on something, an economy that had stolen his breath and stopped his heart. 27 years ago, James Whitmore had been a different person. He'd been Jake Morrison, a scared 18-year-old sitting in a bus, stationed in Seattle with $43 to his name and nowhere to go. His abusive stepfather had finally gone too far, and Jake had run, leaving behind his mother, his baby sister, and the only life he'd ever known. That night, freezing and desperate, he'd been ready to give up entirely when a stranger sat down beside him. The stranger was a middle-aged Asian man in a postal worker's uniform. Eating a sandwich on his break, he'd taken one look at Jake, at the bruises barely hidden by his collar, at the desperation in his eyes, at the shivering that had nothing to do with the cold, and done. Something that changed everything. He'd bought Jake dinner. Then he'd taken him to a shelter. Then he'd returned the next day with information about job programs and GED classes. For 3 months, that postal worker had checked in on Jake every week, offering encouragement, advice, and something Jake had never had before, belief that he could be more than his circumstances. The man's name had been Thomas Chen, and he'd told Jake something he'd never forgotten. "Somebody helped me once when I had nothing. Now I help you. Someday when you have something, you help somebody else. That's how we survive. That's how we stay human." James had changed his name, built his empire, and become someone the old Jake Morrison could never have imagined. But he'd never forgotten Thomas Chen's face. He'd searched for him for years, wanting to thank him, wanting to repay him, but the man had moved and the trail had gone cold. Now looking through that curtain, James saw that face again, older, more tired but unmistakable. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile as he comforted a little girl who was clearly unwell. James's heart hammered. Was it possible? After all these years? He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, ignoring Jennifer's confused protests. He walked through the curtain into economy, navigating the narrow aisle until he stood beside row 23. Marcus looked up, surprised to see a first-class passenger in their section. "Excuse me," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm sorry to bother you, but—" He paused, studying the man's face. "Is your name Thomas Chen?" Marcus blinked in surprise. "Thomas was my father. He passed away 8 years ago. I'm Marcus, his son." The world tilted beneath James's feet. Too late. He was too late to thank the man who'd saved his life. But here was his son, and something in Marcus's exhausted, Determined expression told James that he was facing his own impossible battle. "Your father saved my life," James said quietly, aware that other passengers were starting to stare. 27 years ago in Seattle, I was homeless, broke, ready to give up. He helped me. He told me that someday, when I had something, I should help someone else." His eyes moved to Emma, whose curious gaze moved between them. "Your father never let me pay him back, but I think maybe I'm supposed to pay it forward." Marcus shook his head, confused. That's nice to hear, but we're fine, really. We don't need—" "You're flying to Chicago," James interrupted gently. "Let me guess. Children's Memorial Hospital?" Marcus's face went pale. "How did you—" "Because that's where miracles happen for kids who need them. And because I can see it in your eyes. You're running toward hope with everything you have left." James knelt in the aisle, bringing himself to Emma's level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she whispered. "Are you famous?" "You look like someone from TV." James smiled. "I'm just someone who wants to help. Emma, your grandfather was one of the best men I ever met, and I think he'd want me to make sure you and your dad have everything you need." "Sir, we're managing," Marcus said firmly, though his voice cracked. "We have an appointment at the hospital. We'll figure out the rest." "Marcus," James stood, pulling out his phone. "Your father gave me a chance when I had nothing. He didn't just help me once. He changed the trajectory of my entire life. I'm James Whitmore. Maybe you've heard of me, maybe you haven't. But I have resources your father never had the chance to know about. And I'm not offering charity, I'm honoring a debt." Marcus's eyes widened with recognition. "The James Whitmore? The tech. Oh my God. Your daughter needs a transplant. That means surgery, recovery, medications, follow-up care. That means you need to be by her side, not working 3 jobs to pay for it. Let me help. Please, it's what your father would want." Tears started streaming down Marcus's face, and he didn't even try to hide them. "I sold everything. Everything. I didn't know how after the surgery, I didn't know how—" "You don't have to worry anymore," James said. "Not about the medical bills, not about housing, not about anything. My foundation will cover all of it. And after Emma recovers, and she will recover, we'll make sure you have what you need to start fresh." Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, is this real?" Marcus pulled his daughter close, his whole body shaking with relief and disbelief. "Yeah, baby. It's real. It's really real." The flight attendant approached, clearly ready to ask James to return to his seat for takeoff. But James held up a hand. He spoke to her quietly, and her eyes widened. 5 minutes later, Marcus and Emma were being moved to first class, with the flight attendant treating them like royalty. As the plane lifted into the air, James sat across from them, watching Emma's delighted face as she explored the seat's features. Marcus kept looking at him with tears in his eyes, unable to speak. "Your father told me something I've never forgotten," James finally said. "He said that's how we survive. That's how we stay human, by helping each other. He's gone, but his kindness isn't. It's right here, right now, and it's going to keep going. Through Emma, through you, through everyone we touch." Marcus reached across and gripped James's hand. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "It's exactly enough," James replied. "Because it's what your father said to me when I tried to thank him. He told me the thanks would come when I helped someone else." He smiled at Emma. "Looks like I finally get to say it. You're welcome." 6 months later, Emma Chen ran across the playground outside James Whitmore's foundation headquarters, her new heart beating strong and steady. Marcus had a job with the foundation now, helping identify families in crisis and connecting them with resources. And somewhere, perhaps in the space between memory and hope, Thomas Chen smiled, knowing that his simple act of kindness decades ago had created ripples that would never stop spreading, touching lives he'd never know, in ways he'd never imagined.